Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
Because we have a tight schedule in getting to buses, I will be brief in introducing Maria Pinto, who will then introduce Ned Friedman, who will be giving a talk this afternoon, Tree Obsessions, Celebrating the Ephemeral and Long-Lived Plants. And we know that obsessions can often consume us and our time, so I will say if we don't have time for Q&A here, Ned is available to answer your questions amid the beautiful lilacs and trees and other woody plants that are on campus at the Arboretum. So if you want to ask him questions, please do so there if we run out of time. But for now, it is my great pleasure to offer to the invite to the stage Maria Pinto, who is a writer, educator, and naturalist living in the Boston area. This fall, Great Circle Books at UNC Press will publish her book of essays inspired by the hunt of mushrooms, Fearless, Sleepless, Deathless, What Fungi Taught Me About Nourishment, Poison, Ecology, Hidden Histories, Zombies, and Black Survival. Maria Pinto is an amazing mycologist, and we're so lucky to have her introduce Ned. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I'm just gonna jump right in. I'd like to start my introduction of our speaker with my own introduction to the land he stewards. I first encountered the Arnold Arboretum when I was a college student working as a pet sitter in the early aughts and was directed by my employers to take their 2 enormous Old English sheepdogs to the gardens for their 5 a.m. walk. The dogs people instructed me to walk these colossal teddy bears off leash, which means that my relationship to the grounds was forged in darkest malefaction, and I'm very sorry. I'm so sorry. But even now, 20 years later, I'm struck by my initial impression of the place. How just one section of the conifer collection, with trees so genteel they wore resinous perfume and name tags, still seemed so wild to me at the time, a forest-like apparition in the city, despite what I now know to be its passionate, careful curation. Poet James Stotts called it the most beautiful park in North America, and when the cherry blossoms pop, it's hard to disagree. My relationship to the Arboretum is much more above board these days. I lead bi-monthly mushroom walks there, which are open to anyone who wishes to join. This means that much like the man from whom we're about to hear, I regularly stalk the various collections in search of the slightest efflorescence of life in the kingdom of life to which I've devoted mine. That sort of looking is rewarded at every turn at Arnold over the course of every season spent touring it. Our speaker, Professor William Ned Friedman, once said, "I yearn to see organisms, individual trees, to meet them, witness them, learn from them, and indeed, to age with them." By all accounts, he has tirelessly and reverently devoted his life to doing just that. Arnold gained him as their director in 2011 when he became the 8th person in its 153-year history to fill the role. At the same time, Harvard gained him as the Arnold Professor of Organismic and Evolutionary Biology. His scholarly studies have focused on the earliest phases of the evolution of flowering plants, Darwin's so-called abominable mystery. He is also deeply interested in the history of early, that is, pre-Darwinian, evolutionary thought, and particularly the largely forgotten contributions of horticulturists and botanists. As director, Ned has worked to expand the Arboretum's efforts to promote ex situ conservation of endangered woody plant species through a focused 10-year initiative centered on Eastern Asia and Eastern North America, sorry. As he continues to lead the Arboretum forward from his sesquicentennial year in 2022, 2 fundamental priorities will dominate the Arboretum's focus: environmental justice and combating human-induced global change and extinction. Matthew Battles, editor of the Arboretum's journal Arnoldia, had this to say of Professor Friedman: "He's always in touch with what the plants in our landscape are doing and how they're faring. Before meeting with staff, by way of small talk, he'll invariably report on something blooming or senescing or leafing out or falling over, as in, I checked on this Cassandra on my way over here and they're looking amazing." Not only thinking, but feeling with plants, that's Ned's thing. Please join me in welcoming this thinker, feeler, observer, witness, and advocate of plants to the floor.
Oh, I've never had a kinder introduction in my life. Thank you. Well, I'm so happy to be here, and I want to do two things. A lot of people know the Arboretum and have been there, but I want to take 10 minutes to unpack some layers for you about meaning, and then I want to dive into my obsessions. So first, I'm just going to ask, who are we? And I think it's easy to answer. We are plants, we are landscape, and we are absolutely people. We're one of Frederick Law Olmsted's greatest designs. We are a cherished public park in Boston's Emerald Necklace. If we get our horticulture right, children will do cartwheels. We're host to the vibrant human diversity of Boston. Indeed, because we're free and open to all every day, we are, by definition, an agent of democracy. We're Harvard's Museum of Trees. These are working trees being studied while also being enjoyed. We are a key Harvard research institution studying everything from global change to genomics with lots of beautiful labs out there. But we're also educators dedicated to introducing urban school children to nature. In 2022, we began a new 7th and 8th grade program for Boston public school children, 5 weeks, all day, every day, with the finest teachers, immersing these young people in the sciences. To give that kind of education, we raise and then spend $175,000 each summer. That's what a good education actually costs. And these are really wonderful people to be interacting with. We are trees working to help us understand the effects of global change. We are an urban biodiversity hotspot. A college thesis showed there were more than 70 species of native bees. We work with Tufts University with acoustic monitors. We know we have 6 species of bats. And of course, we've been keeping track of birds for a long time. We're a community committed to combating climate change. We have the largest solar panels installation at Harvard, and that's the first native plant solar meadow in the Commonwealth, with over 50 species of native herbaceous plants growing under there. Why are we interested in herbaceous plants under those panels? Because of the insects, right? That's how you promote insect health. We are friends and colleagues with the peoples and cultures of the world. We have been circling the globe to collect plants that bring back to the Arnold Arboretum to grow. Our most important spot is Asia, as you'll see, and there you can see an image from a 3-year expedition in China that brought material that still grows on the ground. And we now welcome our Chinese colleagues to our North American expeditions, as we did back in 2019. We are a group of intrepid plant explorers. We were in the field in Korea, Japan, and China, and North America just last year, usually 3 or 4 major expeditions to get new germplasm, new genetics, new conservation material. And you can see North America and Asia are our number 1 and 2 top spots. We're home to 16,000 organisms with provenance. When I say provenance, like an art museum and a painting, we know where that seed was collected, we know who collected it, we have followed that object, that living object, from the beginning of its life to the end. There is a dawn redwood. We know it was collected SD as a seed. It arrived in 1948 at the Arnold Arboretum. The W means it was collected in the wild. We know W.C. Cheng collected it. We know what university he worked at. We even have photographs of the families who shared their trees so that we could get these collections. That's provenance. Every tree is living its life like you and I are, as an individuated, non-interchangeable member of a species. We are safe harbor for species that are extinct in the wild, like the Franklin tree. We are a force for conservation and fighting extinction around the world. And we are safe harbor for threatened species. Those almost 3,000 dots out of our 16,000, the green ones, all are members of a species that is threatened with potential extinction. So what does the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard stand for? It's a commitment to protect and celebrate global biological diversity. It's a commitment to scholarship excellence and research use of the living collections. It's a commitment to horticultural excellence, and it's a commitment to environmental justice. And that's what I want to talk about for the next couple of minutes. When we turned 150, as was mentioned in the introduction, I sat down very hard to think about what was the next 150 going to be like? And we decided we would renew our founding public promise of environmental justice. That term did not exist in Olmsted's time, but it is the meaning of open and democratic. And we would do everything we could to combat global change and extinction. So let me tell you about our plan of action. It turns out we work with the city and they own the hardscape. Every gate and entrance is city property. But sometimes it doesn't feel like they're taking good care of it. This is an entrance that I inherited that goes to an environmental justice community with public housing. And it's a disgrace, as you can see on the left. And it was something I wasn't willing to live with. And for 10 years, I've been bugging the city. And on the right is the photograph I took 3 weeks ago. We are welcoming people in respectfully instead of with drug use and garbage and all of the other stuff. So we're even studying it, although this grant was canceled by the government last week. To work with people in the public housing complex. But this gave me an idea about radical accessibility, the idea that design could welcome people into a sacred space like the Arnold. So Michael van Valkenburg Associates won the design competition, and we are now raising the money to take over the city's decrepit, broken entrances, and we are prioritizing environmental justice. You can see a gate there, iron bars welded shut because they broke, no signage, no evidence that one should go in there, unless, of course, you're born like me with privilege. And that's not right. And this entrance is almost done. It's been deconstructed, $2.3 million, and it has been reconstructed, and then the planting design will welcome you, and there'll be signage. We're now turning to an entrance across from the Forest Hills T with 17 bus lines and, of course, the Orange Line terminus. And that project is launched. And signage will be incredibly important. And I want you to see what every threshold sign will say. And these are 3 words I want you to think hard about when you come today. Every tree here in the Arboretum is a unique organism living its own life just like you. Individuate these organisms. Give them standing. Really important. Every tree here belongs to a living collection of closely related species from around the world. Just like an art museum, you go into a gallery room for a kind of art, we're taxonomically arranged. You go into the maple gallery for an intensification of the experience of what mapleness is. Then you move to the oak gallery and you go in there for an intensification of what it means to be an oak. That is a museum of trees. And finally, because we're designed by Olmsted, every tree here is part of a scenic landscape designed for you to experience. These are the 3 words I hope everyone, as we install this signage, will begin to play with on their own, in their own way. So those are my words, and now we're going to launch into some obsessions. So, and obsessions can be bad, but I think there are many healthy ones. So let's start with Goethe and the Italian Journey. To wander about among a vegetation which is new to one is pleasant and instructive. It is the same with familiar objects. In the end, we cease to think about them at all. What is seeing without thinking? And this is so true of the plant world. We walk in a world of green. We don't actually see it necessarily as we walk through it. So how can we be more intentional at looking? Well, when I got to the Arboretum, I have a lab there, I have an office there, and I live 2 blocks from the Arnold Arboretum. And I always carry a small pocket camera into the collections. This simple practice of photographing, and I'm a plant morphologist, my discipline was founded by Goethe, Metamorphosis of Plants, has led to somewhat surprisingly over 15,000 images are now on my databases. Anyone in the world can go and look up and see what I photographed and use those pictures as they wish. And I will tell you that one of the most wonderful experiences I had this spring was meeting this baby blackjack oak. I was on the collecting expedition when the acorn was collected as it leafed out after bud break with this beautiful, intense set of reds, but also dense pubescence. And look at the back of this leaf with that red rim and the venation and that white, which is all hair, pubescence, trichomes. It's funny, but that leaf made my day. It was transformative. So let's talk about an obsession I have in the spring. Well, many people think about Lilac Sunday. I'm okay with lilacs. I have nothing against them, but they don't do much for me. But when I'm in the conifer collection, I know spring has arrived. Many of you will think about pine cones and other conifer cones as being woody, brown structures. Or here's a larch cone at maturity. How many of you can conjure an image of what a cone is like when it emerges from its bud? Great. But most of you have not, and yet you've walked by them. Here is a European larch cone upon emergence. And no two European larches are the same. Here's another plant, different specimen, just like you and me, we don't look identical, with just a rim of pink. Here's the Siberian larch, which is actually the first to cone. That's the mark. The day spring begins is when I can find a Siberian larch cone like that. Japanese larch. And then the larches go away, and on comes Douglas fir. And these cones are over an inch tall. And you may have walked by them a million times, but what is seeing without thinking? We have to develop our eye. And if you wait, it's really just a few days of peak color. That's what it's like a couple weeks later. Then we go to the spruces. That's the next show in the conifers. And these beautiful cones appear. They have an actual dance. The cone scales relax. They get pollinated, and then they come back up. You can actually see these movements, and they glow. And some of them aren't red. They're what I think of as sorbet, lemon and raspberry, this Norway spruce. And some of them are more raspberry. And here's one that's not even got any yellow in it. All of them Norway spruces with beautiful pattern, just extraordinary things to look at. And you don't even need a hand lens. You just need to stand there and look. And here's the dragon spruce from China. Not all spruces have those reds. The last spruce to really cone is the tiger tail spruce, and it really just has a touch of orange on the underside, but magnificent stuff. And then next come the firs. The Korean fir in its green, the Veitch's silver fir with its purples, and then the one that caught me totally off guard one day as I wandered in the conifers, a young Himalayan fir with almost jet black cones, like a candelabra. It just stopped me dead in my tracks. And right now, if you go, it's up for the pines, and they're wonderful small cones. And that's where the pollen is flying in the arboretum, and that's where you'll find the cones that have the color. Now, I'm going to go to another one that's a little bit short, but it has to do with rhododendrons and Vissen threads. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but this is, in fact, an ode to Rebecca McMacken. Because in this room, I discovered last night, I know I'm embarrassing you terribly, but how many of you have ever heard of Vissen threads before? Okay, one, and of course, Rebecca. So I'm an embryologist. This is my stuff. So one day I went out, it was a rainy day, and it had finally stopped raining, and I just love seeing rain on plant surfaces. The beads of water, there's just something very beautiful about it. And I went and I took this picture of this rhododendron fortunii. It's a Chinese rhododendron. The flowers actually smell like bubble gum, and it's in flower right now. It's kind of a weird smell, but it's definitely part of the experience. And I looked at what I was seeing and I thought, there's something I hadn't noticed before. And I'm going to show you the next picture. Do you see that there are these anthers, the pollen filament structures that are sticking out? Do you see little threads hanging out of them that are about, yay long compared to the anther? Well, I'm going to give you a close-up. And you should be able to see that there are these anthers that make the pollen, and coming out of them is a chain of something. These are pollen grains, and each pollen grain is attached to the next pollen grain by what's called a Vissen thread. And all rhododendrons do this, meaning that you can actually pull every pollen grain out of the anther in one string. And let me show you what that looks like. And so if you just tap that little rhododendron, out comes a string of what look like microscopic pearls. It's magnificent. The anthers are what we would call poricidal. That's what's pouring out the wonderful things. And if you just do this, out come all of the pollen grains in a beautiful microscopic pearl necklace. I'll put it under the microscope for you right now, and you can see it. And then if you look very closely, this next picture right here, can you see the little clasps, very thin, that are connecting each of the grains to the next one? That's a Vissen thread. And under the scanning electron microscope, that's it. You could go to Tiffany's for the rest of your life, and I can promise you, having seen what I've just shown you, Tiffany's is diminished. So I will tell you that we had a lot of fun with it, and what I didn't tell you is that the thing that was vibrating the flower was vibrating at the same pace as a bee when it buzz pollinates a flower. So I was giving you a fake insect that was shaking the pollen out. Now, my last obsession. A lot of people will say, well, what do you do? Do you come to the Arboretum in the winter? And I'm always surprised when I get this question. I'm not saying anyone here would ever be so oblivious to the Arboretum and its charms in the winter. But I do get asked that, and I think winter is one of the most beautiful times to be in an arboretum. For the deciduous trees, it's pure architecture. For the conifers that hold the snow in their boughs, it is the stunning display like this in our conifer collection. But for me, my obsession in the winter is smooth bark. Now, I don't have anything against rough or deeply furrowed bark. I want to be really clear about that. I embrace all bark. But smooth bark in the winter is extraordinary. The colors are going to be at their most extreme because you have the intense sun beating down on them, and there's a lot going on. They will not be anywhere near this in the winter. So I'll start with some of my favorite smooth barks, which are the snakebark maples. And this is the Manchurian snakebark maple. Looks like snake skin with the white waxes, of course, and it is incredibly beautiful. Now, this same maple in another tree might not be green, but might be this tangerine. Here's another snakebark maple, just magnificent. And all you're going to see are squares, just the simple bark itself. Red vein maple with its beautiful diamond checks. And then the one species of snakebark maple that's native to North America, the moosewood, Acer pennsylvanicum. This specimen mostly waxes, but just magnificent. Now, this is not a snakebark maple, but this is, in fact, a rare and endangered species, very endangered. And in fact, I have a dissertation student working on why it has such trouble setting seed. And it has an almost muscular look. But in the winter, when the sun is low, as the paperbark maple peels, you get a fringe. And if you line up with the sun, it looks as if there's a fire up and down the sides of the axis. It literally glows in the fall and the winter. It's spectacular. Now I head over to our birch gallery to see the whites, and they're not all the same white. And the lenticels, these beautiful long structures that actually exchange gas for the inner tissues that need to actually have a gas exchange. Or the downy birch with just a little touch of cream. Or the Asian black birch and some of the patterns on its bark. The paper birch. I love exfoliation. Here we have the Korean birch giving rise to that new, not yet white next layer of the skin of a plant, a tree. The Dahurian birch, which is smooth, but it's like a pile of potato chips. I quite like this tree in the sense that it piles up in beautiful ways. And then over to some of our elms and elm relatives, the Chinese Zelkova. One day I'm walking in the snow. I hadn't really seen the bark in January. And in the summer, it won't be orange. It'll be something, orangish, but it looks like a giraffe on the loose in the Arnold Arboretum in the winter. It's just stunning. And again, it was the highlight of that walk. And some of the patterns you see, for example, in other species of Zelkova. And one of my favorites is actually a Chinese species of pine, the lacebark pine. You may think of pines as having deeply furrowed bark. This one has smooth bark. And you can see the reds and the greens, a little bit of silver, but sometimes they'll throw a little bit of orange. And you can watch them exfoliate and see that the oldest patina is the red, and that what's revealed with the youngest patina is the yellow. And you can see the greens. And in the winter, if you go there to our lacebark trees, pines, you can look at the ground and see the puzzle pieces on the ground that have exfoliated. That was really an extraordinary thing to see. Now you might head over to our Stewartia collection. They also have beautiful smooth barks with puzzle-like pieces and different kinds of textures. Here's one that almost has a reptilian sort of bumpy skin, I would say. But one that I will tell you I make a pilgrimage to every winter many times, and it's of all of the plants of this species I've seen, we have one that does something beyond anyone's belief, and that is the Korean Stewartia pseudocamellia. It turns silver, and you can see the new patina underneath of the newly revealed bark that's going to become orange. And there are days in January where I could swear I would look at this and see myself in a mirror. You don't, but it looks like beautiful, beautiful mirrors. And then I stand at the base of this tree as it reaches and ascends into the sky, and I am just amazed that all I have to do is be there to be lifted. And when I went to Korea last year, I asked for one trip into the field to go to where these trees were collected, and I got to see one in the wild. And by the way, the bark isn't that great in Korea, but it's not the winter, of course. And then there's the Chinese Stewartia, which is really almost a cocoa. And I'll show you the tree that I took this picture of. Beautiful architecture. So I'm going to end by telling you about a single experience I had about 2 hours in my life at the Arboretum that will be the thing I will remember at the very end as the most extraordinary interaction with the world and the universe in my life. So many of you will know that we have a beech tree, and they can throw beautiful colors. Like this is a European beech, and this one is actually a mutant form of European beech. It doesn't grow tall, it goes in spirals. It's called tortuosa beech, Fagus sylvatica. This tree came to us in 1888 from Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. It's a natural mutation that occurs in the wild. This tree was collected as a sapling in France. And it's a magnificent tree, right? Look and look and look. That's a tree worth seeking out. But I'd read in Aristotle's Problematica, why is it that an eclipse of the sun, if one looks at it through a sieve or through leaves, such as a plane tree or other broadleaf tree, or if one joins the fingers of one hand over the fingers of the other, the rays are crescent-shaped where they reach the earth? Of course, he's describing pinhole cameras and an eclipse. So I decided on August 21st, 2017, to stand under that tree for an eclipse. I knew the bark was smooth. I knew the ground would be dark. And this is what I saw. The sun was 93 million miles away. The moon, some 250,000 miles away. An 1888 specimen of tortuosa beech with a mutation was over my head. And I watched the moon rotate through the sun. I have never felt more connected to the universe than those moments I spent with that tree. So I'll end with a poem, one that I've carried with me from my college days. It's by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies. I hold you here, root and all, in my hand, little flower. But if I could understand what you are, root and all in all, I should know what God and man is. Thank you.
Wow. Was I the only one deeply moved by that?
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2025, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.